The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 8. The Vicious Circle. Chapter 1. The Physiological Norm and the Vicious. Of all the tokens of the flight of the contemporary European personality from the old arduous and responsible position in whose rigors it delighted, now made too hot for it, there is none so significant as the sex transformation that is such a feature of post-war life. A few years ago this topic would have been exceedingly difficult to deal with in a book destined for public sale. Even today it is not an easy one, but for rather different reasons. On what tone are we to address ourselves to the consideration of this inverted fashion, abstracting ourselves, of necessity, from any prejudices we may feel for the purpose? Dr. Montagnon, Archives d'Anthropologie Criminelle, the great authority on China, said that he had never heard a Chinese express any disapproval of sexual inversion except that it was universally agreed to be bad for the eyes. Until quite recently European society took a very severe view of it, which dislike was apparently a sort of tradition in any case among the Germanic peoples. Genuine, fully developed physical inversion in men is probably quite rare. In a time unfavorable to its practice it makes a sort of martyr of the individual born with it, a martyr to his glands, like the painter called Sands in the Limerick, or in the sense that we say a martyr to the gout. People regard it askance as a kind of possession, and in many rough communities every misfortune would befall these delinquents of natural processes, whose quite simple and harmless topsy-turvydom was associated with witchcraft and treated on that basis. Even so late as the famous 90s the English courts made a martyr of that description of Oscar Wilde. He became almost a political martyr, other countries using his well-advertised agony to point to the Philistinism of England. A very amiable and charming person, he awakened the chivalrous instincts everywhere, like a very attractive maiden in distress. And as he possessed to the full the proselytizing zeal that usually goes with sex inversion, as with any other intensification of sex, he prepared the ground with his martyrdom, ecstatic recantations, eloquent and tearful confessions, and the great prestige of his wit, for the complete reversal of the erotic machinery that has ensued or is ensuing. An admission of complete moral blindness and indifference, although it might be damaging under certain circumstances, will not be misplaced in handling this subject. But there is another aspect of the matter that also claims attention. There are many people, perhaps, who would be lacking, as I am, in moral sensitiveness, and who would yet be in some way physically offended by practices against nature. This would be extremely unreasonable, as I have already suggested, for to an impartial taste, divinely exempt from participation in either normal or abnormal joys, as we call them, their normality would be just as offensive. They might very well offend the most fastidious god more than the object of their disgust, for their norm would be merely the dislike or revolt of the senses against something different, not part of their personal norm or system. It would, in short, be the animal self-complacency and self-love that thinks itself natural and engaging, and everything else unnatural and disengaging. The physical is the only aspect that interests the majority of people, however, which makes the non-physical impracticable as a basis of discussion, or at least very difficult. That there is any other side to a fundamental thing of common experience, about themselves, in short, they require much persuading. Nevertheless, the attempt has to be made, since the subject is important. There is still, of course, one thing, but that a physical and exterior one, that plays an important part with many people in any such question as this. A drunkard soon develops a red nose and a generally inflamed, bloated, and dissipated appearance. Red noses are for some reason universally disliked by both men and women. So in the case of the drunkard, although no one would be likely to raise any objection to or experience any disgust at the physical act of pouring into the mouth a probably attractively colored liquid, the result of this action in the long run is the red nose by which people are generally repelled for some reason. The Nancyism of the joy boy or joy man, the over-mannered personality, the queer insistence on delicate nurture, that air of assuring those met that he is a real lady, like the traditional music hall tart who is always a clergyman's daughter, the grating or falsetto lisp, or the rather cross hauteur of the democratic tea-shop waitress are to some human norm almost as central as that which resents the red nose, or the big paunch, offensive. But the drunkard is at peace with his red nose, probably, and left to himself can live on terms of mutual respect with his paunch, no doubt. Some human norm, the same one, perhaps, that is outraged by the red nose, hates the rat and the beetle. But its idea of the rat is not at all that which the rat has of itself. It loves its swift, clammy sausage of a body as much as the human being does his hairless, erect machine. That erect, conceited human norm may yet have to bend to the will of the rat or the serpent, and go about on its belly near the ground. and then it will be just as pleased with itself as at present, and indeed be happier relieved of the white man's burden come the human burden come its amazing moral rectitude. I suggest that it is only the over-instinctive person, the slave of the humanal to human norm, who would be such a stickler for the natural as the reactions sketched above imply. It is this unfortunate conservative humanal to human norm that we are incessantly combating. It is even that old Adam in the Nancy that makes him so satisfied with his humble eccentricity, and insignificant loudly advertised change of gear, like the exultant cackling of a hen who had laid an egg of an, for it, unwanted caliber. It is not, alas, by victories of such modest proportions over our too rigid physiologic norm that we can hope to break it down, if that is our intention. We merely flatter and preserve it by such indirect attentions. But in order to advance a little farther into the physical problems involved in such a scrutiny, let us take the objections of the conventional bridegroom on his marriage night to evidences of unchastity in his bride. Marrying, the man of the approved masculine type is distressed and disillusioned if he find that someone has forestalled him in the tasting of this fruit. The guilt is off the gingerbread. This painful situation we usually take at its face value. We think we know what we mean by the gingerbread, and where it is situated. It is on the physical plane, in short, that we believe this deception to have occurred. In this, I think, we are wrong. Suppose, for instance, that the disappointed bridegroom learns that, instead of being deflowered in the course of a love intrigue, his bride has been deflowered against her will on a lonely road by a tramp. Then the situation changes for him at once. There is a flood of bitter tears on the part of the bride, he folds her in his arms and all is well. For it is not the physical fact that has disturbed his repose of mind. It is the person, she, gazing at him out of her lovely, personal eyes, that it has caused him such a disagreeable shock to find he was not the first with. The act of deflowering, it is true, occurred, technically, on the physical plane. But that, were there no person attached to it, would be of no more importance than something happening to an automaton, no more than the daily dirtying of the hands, which are washed and then they are clean again, no more than the figure in the bois, in Mallarmé's prose poem, observed embracing Mother Earth. For it is a person, a mind, that he has married, incarnated and expressed, it is true, by a certain body. But that body is, in a sense, in the things that happen to it, if that is possible, independently of the mind, as unimportant by itself as the materials by which it is surrounded, its clothes, the tables and chairs, dust on the road, or bricks of the house. Disconnected from the person, if that may be, and it is dead. In short, the body outraged by the tramp would be a corpse only. The body enjoyed by an earlier lover would be alive. In the latter case it would be she, Daphne, Joan, or Elizabeth. It is the personality he is in touch with when he looks into her eyes, and not a bit of flesh, that is, as flesh, of the same impersonal order as a bit of cloth, a lump of clay, a sponge, a vegetable, that all the trouble is about. This illustration will, I hope, suffice to suggest to us that in all such things the physical event is of very little importance by itself. In the case of sex, more than anything else, the fuss is supposed to be about that, and localized to physical experience. In reality we are always dealing with something else. It is in this misunderstanding that morals thrive. The shallow disgust or indignation of the moralist is installed in an elementary materialism that appeals directly to the animal machinery of combat or rut. Its pompous censure is able to surround, as though with an aureole of intelligence and martyrdom, something that is, what? If we pause to think what it is we should no doubt laugh at the conjuring trick, the piece of sardonic illusionism to which we all surrender. But when that comic screen had been removed, at the heart of the tissue would be found the same intelligical reality which gives significance to all the material life we know. But that physical delusion, with all its mocking symbolism, that has roused us to protest or repulsion clasping to our hearts, with no repulsion, an almost identical object ourselves, is of the very essence also of the practice responsible for it. The moral indignation, or loudly expressed disgust, of the plain man or the plain woman is the twin and complement of that self-satisfaction and sense of outrageous discovery that is the incentive on the other, unnatural, side of this sexual pale. The sex revolution of the invert is a bourgeois revolution, in other words. The petty bourgeois type predominates, a red tie, or its equivalent in the approved badges of sexual revolt, tells its theatrical tale. The Puritan conscience, in Anglo-Saxon countries, provides the basis of the condiment, and gives sex inversion there its particular material physiognomy of protest and overimportance. How moral, essentially, the anti-moral stimulus must be is not difficult to grasp, when you are privileged to witness its operation in the English or American. And so the vicious circle is described.